very soft road. If you don't keep your trailer exactly perfectly dead centered, it's going to suck you right into that ditch line and possibly be flipping your whole entire load over.
Axemen was a guilty pleasure for so many people, especially after they introduced the nail-biting adventures along with a pinch of drama and conflict. The show was making a lot of waves and people were hooked to the show. Axemen revolved around the life and struggles of loggers in forests, and there were multiple crews of loggers who walked us through the entire process. The show featured crews collecting logs from forests of Montana, Oregon, and Washington. Earlier, logging dangers was an unsung story, but after this show, a lot of awareness was raised about the profession. But from this point forward, the show went straight downhill, encountering one disaster after another. Soon, Axemen suddenly went off air, and no news about the show was heard. This made the fans really confused, and today we'll discover the real reason Axemen was ended.
You alright, buddy? Yeah. Make sure you keep giving me that signal. I don't want you to get hurt, okay, buddy?
Axemen probably would have worked if it wasn't for arrests of multiple members. These arrests heavily affected the popularity and reputation of the show. The members were even fighting constantly, and it wasn't sending the right messages across. For starters, Shelby Stanger was arrested for illegally cutting down a tree that was someone else's property, so it straight up was a case of destruction of property, and the show's producers weren't happy with it at all. Mike Pyle is yet another member of Axemen who had a bad track record with the law. Mike is actually the owner of Mike Pyle Logging. He got into a huge controversy back in 2009, and the case got so viral that everyone was talking about it, and also put Axemen in hot waters too. What Mike did was that he drank a lot and lost control over his senses. He thought it would be a good idea to go for a drive in this condition. It obviously was a recipe for disaster, as he flipped his Jeep, and as a result 3 children were injured. And guess what? The injured children were his very own kids. Although the kids weren't heavily injured, it was still a huge deal. The police couldn't charge Mike with a DUI, but he ended up facing felony charges. This also garnered a lot of backlash to the show itself and started the downfall that eventually became the end of Axemen. As it turns out, Roger Gunter also has a very tricky history, as he's known to hunt even without having a proper license. Gunter was actually caught about 6 times, and he claims to be on the right track now. That doesn't seem very likely. Jimmy Smith was a very important part of Axemen. He was everyone's favourite, and fans loved watching him. But then one day, it was revealed that Jimmy was reportedly stealing wood from the shooting site and was selling it for his personal profit. It wasn't just unethical, but also illegal. But this was only the beginning of a very big scam that Jimmy meticulously planned. Jimmy was older than most cast members and reportedly had several injuries and impairments in his shoulder, back, neck and arms. This meant that he most certainly won't be able to do any heavy lifting on the show, and he'll only be supervising, but as we saw on Axemen, he was doing everything from cutting huge logs and even carrying them. This made it pretty clear that he either lied about his impairment or he was miraculously cured on the show. But soon it was revealed that he was getting more than $50,000 in the form of disability benefits, and that's why he had 2 disability claims that were garnering him additional financial and medical benefits. His scam was soon exposed when he was able to lift weights and cut logs that even people younger than him couldn't do. As these important members of the show continued to lose their credibility and were turning into either felons or scammers, the show was losing its spark, and people started complaining about producers not doing a proper background check on them before getting them on board. The show also had a run-in with the law when, just after 1 year of its release, the Washington Natural Resources Department initiated a raid on S&S logging site and got their hands on more than 24 logs. These logs were illegal, and S&S had no permission to keep them. They also got a search warrant to look for timber that the company got from Hoquiam River. This was because the company never really got a permit for the timber, so this too was illegal. Jimmy Smith was the owner of this company, the same Jimmy who was already involved in multiple frauds. He even revealed at one instance that the log was worth more than $10,000, so it obviously was a huge deal that they were just taking them home without any permit or license. It raised a huge question on the show, and how exactly were the producers gonna make sure that everything the logging companies were doing was legal and ethical? Now, according to reports, the Natural Resources Department clearly said that there was no way they gave a permit to Jimmy Smith's company for retrieving timber because they only allow the removal of logs in case of any natural disaster. So, the DNR actually moved on with a proper legal plan against the company, and not just Jimmy, but a lot more people were in big trouble. Another huge disaster was when the logger community started criticizing the show online and said that they don't need the wrong representation because of half the things featured on the show are completely false. They add all the drama and controversies just to make the show a little more spicy, but it's far from the truth in reality, and loggers have said online that these people don't even know half of the reality of the logging industry. This backlash also damaged the reputation of the reality show, and there were a lot of people pointing out the mistakes that the expert loggers were making. Axemen has a long list of tragic accidents, after which it became inevitable for the creators to discontinue the show. First off, it was William Colantuno, who appeared in 2 of the seasons. He didn't just get into an accident, but he also lost his life during the shoot. It was 2013 and William was in a helicopter trying to transport logs through the Oregon forest. But suddenly, a technical issue appeared and the helicopter actually crashed. He was a constant on the show for 2 seasons, and this accident made a lot of headlines and raised questions on the safety precautions taken by the Axemen producers and crew. Another accident happened soon after, when Gabe Rygard, a very important cast member, lost his life in a car accident. He was driving a Ford Bronco and was about to reach Washington when another vehicle collided with his Ford, and he unfortunately lost his life. The accident was really bad, and it again made people question the kind of instructions given to transporters of the show. But this time, this controversy blew up because Gabe was a huge star on Axemen and everyone loved watching him. After Gabe, the show went downhill and the ratings dropped too. Dwayne Deathless also lost his life, and he was a huge part of pile loggings. The reason for Dwayne's sudden demise was never publicly explained. Axemen also faced a lot of criticism for not bringing anything new to the table after a while. The fans started complaining that the show became really predictable and scripted, and things were constantly getting repeated, so it kind of got boring. Besides, they also said that the publicity stunts on the show were getting kind of annoying, and even some of the injuries seemed scripted. Some people also complained that the writers didn't have a lot of material and they stretched certain scenes a lot. But the worst criticism came from environmentalists, who claimed that the show was nothing more than glorified and documented destruction of the environment, and that some of the cast members even took pride in destroying natural habitats. All the fights and conflict scenes also seemed pretty scripted, especially the father-son story angles, and the fans believed that the producers could do better with such a big cast. Instead, they were more interested in simply garnering views through whatever methods at their disposal.